Morning, morning everyone. Thankfully, for the first time in ages, everything looks as if it's working, which is good. Afternoon, Rahul, and good morning, Steph. Good afternoon to India. Right, morning, Becky. Just pop that there, pop that there. There we go. That's better. Right, let's go. So we've nearly finished our third tour of the body, and we're on to the wrist and hand. We did the finished off the elbow last week. We looked at the nerve and the blood supply of the elbow, and obviously we want to link that up with the hand in the coming weeks. Before we do that, though, we'll go through the layers. So if you've never done this before, then what we do is that region by region, we start with the bones first, and then we add on the connective tissue, and then the muscles and the tendons, and then we move into the blood supply and the nerve supply. So it builds it from the bones out, and when we do that as well, we then link in to the previous sections that we've done. So then you've got a complete picture of how everything works together. Or that's the plan anyway. So we are now starting on we're starting on the wrist, and this was probably one of my one of the hardest areas, really, because my initial training was in sports massage and sports therapy, and we didn't really do much hand and wrist stuff at all. We covered it a little bit, but in no great detail. So it was something that I had to spend quite a bit of time when I did osteo course, get into grips with, because we studied every area. Well, like I teach. Okay, so exactly what I deliver on here is the kind of level that we needed for the osteo program. So we needed to know it, and I realised that I didn't really know it that well. So, and then it became a bit of a challenge. So it was now one of the areas that I really like, because I've spent loads of time revising it. So there's a couple of little things that we can that you can do to help you remember the wrist anatomy, especially, and because there's lots of bones going on. So with if you're a beginner to this, it can be really confusing. So we'll try and simplify it as much as we can. But really, the best way to learn anatomy is just to keep on going over it again and again and again and again. And hence third time round, soon to be fourth time coming up soon. So let's get going then. So we've got wrist and hand bones and bony landmarks. So bones, obviously the actual bones of the wrist and the hand, but the bony landmarks are the lumps and bumps that are on those bones that help you to identify either which bone it is or other structures around it. So some are really quite important, and they, depending on what you do, the kind of exercises that you give or treatment that you do, depends on how specific you need to be. So some kind of generalized treatments, you won't need to know every in and out of the hand and the wrist. But if you are going to do injections, then you need to be pretty specific. So it's good to know exactly where you are. Right then, let's get rid of that. Where's that gone? That one. There we go. So just a bit of an overview first of all. So wrist and hand, we've got. We're going to have a look at the articulations, which are the joins between the bones, first of all. Then the movements that are available at each of those articulations, and some movements are quite big and some are really small, and the reasons for it are usually because of the anatomy. And once you have a bit of a closer look, it's like, oh right, okay, that makes sense why you can't move your wrist that way, but you can move it the other way a bit more easily. And also it will help you identify when things don't don't go quite right. So if you've got a certain direction of movement in the wrist where it's just naturally restricted, and then you fall into that direction of movement, that and all of your body weight is trying to force it into that direction of movement, then it's more likely to get to have a fracture. So it kind of explains some of the pathology that we get as well. And then, yeah, so movements and then bony landmarks as well, so all the kind of lumps and bumps around the wrist and the hand. So firstly, what we need to do is look at the other end of the radius and the ulna. So we've been having a look at the proximal end, so the end closest to the main structures of the body, and how they all join together to form the elbow. Now we're going to have a look at the distal end, so the bit furthest away, and how those bones join together, but then also how they join into the wrist to allow the movements of the wrist. Okay, so that's what we're looking at. So the radius, we've been looking at this end. So we looked at the radial head and the radial tuberosity, and we were talking about where biceps attaches and all of that kind of stuff. And now we're going to zoom all the way down to here. And just try not to move that slide. There we go. Just lock that in place. There we go. We're going to now have a look at this end. And what you'll notice is there's a bit of a flip. So in the elbow, the ulna is the biggest, the widest part of the bone, and the radius is quite small. And at the wrist, it's the other way around. So if we have a look here with the radius is quite wide at the wrist end. Okay, and then this bit here, this little bump here, this is called the styloid process. I mean, again, we talked about this last time when we were looking at some muscles that attach it into the styloids. So there's a styloid on the ulna and there's a styloid on the radius as well. And it basically means like a stylus, so like a pen. And if you have a look at it, it is like a nib of a pen. Yeah, so if you held that radius, you could dip it in ink and probably write with that tip. So the shaft of the radius is broader distally. So as you go down, it widens. We've got anterior, posterior, and interosseous borders, and we talked about the interosseous membrane when we looked at the connective tissue of the elbow. We're going to also have a look at it for the wrist as well, so we'll bring that in next week. The distal end of the bone is marked by the radial styloid process. So that is that lump just, I can't get the arrow in the right place there, just there, okay? And then something called Lister's tubercle. So there is a raised lump just here on the radius, and that's useful to know if you're looking at any kind of imaging of the wrist and some of the structures that pass, so the tendons basically that pass down into the hand, because Lister's tubercle divides certain structures. Okay, so if you're medial to Lister's tubercle, then you know it's certain amount of certain tendons, and if it's the other side of Lister's tubercle, then you know it's some others. Okay, so and we'll talk about those when we start adding in the muscles and the tendons. We've got two facets. Facets are the faces of the joint for articulation with the carpal bones. So if you flip the radius on its end, you'd see these two smooth surfaces that join onto the carpals, which are the small bones in the wrist. Okay, so that's your radius. We'll have a look at the ulna, and then I'll show you a little video of the two of these. Right, is that going to go now? So bear with me a second. There we go. That should work now. Yeah, there we go. So this is the ulna, and again bigger towards the elbow, and then can you see it gets smaller now? Whereas the radius was the opposite way around. Yeah, so the radius got bigger, the ulna's got smaller. There's the styloid of the ulna just there. So we've got again this little kind of nib on the end of the bone at the end of the ulna. So it's narrow distally, so it gets The further away you get, the narrower it gets. It's also got anterior, posterior, and an interosseous border. So we've got a front section, a back section, and then a middle section. We'll talk about that again. The posterior border is palpable, so you can feel that the entire length of the whole ulna. Yeah, so from the olecranon, so from your elbow, all the way down to the styloid process, the ulnar process, you can feel all the way down the entire length of that bone. The distal end, so this end here, is small and characterized by the ulnar styloid and the head of the ulna. So we've got a kind of bulbous head to the end of this bone as well. Cool. Right. Let's have a look at those. Let me just get rid of some of these. Okay, so here we have the distal radius and ulnar. So because that bit's wider, that bit has to be the radius. This bit is the ulnar just here, and you can see the little you can't see the styloid so well on there, but you can see it definitely on that ulnar just there. So we've got the ends of the bones, and then these are the facets. So see that smooth area there, and then another smooth area there. Yeah, so we've got these facet joints. There is a little bit of cartilage in between these bones as well, because these bones are going to spin on each other. So remember at the proximal end, where the radial head was, it was wrapped around with a ligament, the annular ligament, and the radial head span in that ligament. So then the distal end, so this end, has to also flip, yeah, and that's the join where it flips around to create pronation supination at the wrist. Just play that through. So there's the head of the ulnar and the ulnar styloid. You've got a little bit of a facet kind of shape here and here as well. So your carpal rows are going to slot into those, which are the small wrist bones. So yeah, so there's your ulnar styloid. Quite prominent on this particular bone. And then the little facet joints just here. Ah, there we go. That's a better angle. So you can see the styloid there of the radius. Doesn't look as pronounced from the other view. Right, so this is it with a bit of connective tissue on. Excuse me, coughing again. So we've got cartilaginous structures holding the bones in place. And then we're going to have a look at the movement of these bones in a second. So the carpal rows have been removed. So basically the hand has been taken away so that you can see end on of the radius and the ulna. And then here, there we go. So there's the end of the ulna. And then there's the radius there. So that, yeah, this bit here, we're not really going to cover this right now, but it's nice to have a bit of an introduction to it. So we've got something called the TFCC on this ulnar side, and sometimes that you can have a rupture there, so you can injure this this tissue. It's triangular fibrocartilage. It's a disc that is in between the joint spaces to help with the movements of the wrist, and sometimes this can get injured. You can have a TFCC injury. There is a specific test that you can do to test the integrity of that area, see whether it's still intact. So here's the join, and then there's the flip over, look. Yeah, so the triangular fibrocartilage stays in place, and the whole of the radius just flips over the ulna. So I'm just going to play that back again. So there we are with some connective tissue in place. You can see the join there. So that's it flipping, but then they take a bit of tissue away here so you can see the join a bit better. So there's your TFCC. So it is triangular type shape, and then we've got the radius here, and it's going to flip over the head of the ulna, and there it goes there. So a bit like a windscreen wiper. Yeah, so when you get pronation and supination at the wrist, that's what's occurring at the ends of those bones. So that's these ones. Okay, so that's the end of your radius and ulnar. And here it is in kind of easy pictorial form. Again, these instructions of how to palpate these areas. If you want to pause the video once you're done watching, and then use the images to help you. This information is from the Trail Guide to the Body book. So again, if you're into manual therapy, manual medicine, then it's a really good book to help you identify different structures. And yeah, like I said, that these are the instructions from that book. So it shows you how to palpate the styloids, the head of the ulnar, and radial styloid as well. Okay. Cool. There we go. And then this is Lister's, and you couldn't really see it on the video very well. I've got some other images where we look front on as the tendons are coming through the wrist, and you'll see Lister's tubercle a little bit easier on that. But this is on the dorsal view. Okay, so palmar view is your palm, dorsal view is that one. So on the radial side, which is the thumb side, if you have a feel down your radius bone all the way down to the thumb side, so that area just around about there, and if you kind of rub side to side, so with my arm across my body like that, you just rub forward and back, and you'll feel a lump, you'll feel like a raised ridge on the radius, and that raised ridge is that structure there. So that's Lister's tubercle. And yeah, so you got the radial styloid, then there's a bit of a dip, then there's Lister's, then there's another little bit of a dip, and then you've got the ulnar styloid on the other side. So these bony landmarks help you to compartmentalize so some of the tendons that will come down into the hand. Okay, and again, we'll cover that over the next couple of weeks. Cool. Okay, so that's the end of your radius and ulnar. Now we're going to have a look at the beginning of the wrist bones, which are your carpal bones. I'm just going to move me out of the way here. So this is a left hand palm view like that. Okay, so if you there's the radius, and then there's the ulnar just there. So if you had your hand flat, kind of that way, then thumb would be here, little finger would be here. Okay, so you can see when we learn the wrist, we try to simplify it, and we learn it as if it's 2 rows of bones. Okay, so 2 rows of 4. But as you can see in this picture, it doesn't really work like that. You've got some bones that are on top of others, some are closer together, some are a little bit further back, and they're kind of curved. So you have this curve of 8 bones. So there are 8 bones, but they're not in 2 rows of 4. Yeah. So when you start, if you do any kind of mobilization of these bones, and you're trying to identify certain ones, you have to get out of your head that they're in a line, because they're not. They're curved inwards. Okay. So we've got 8 carpal bones arranged in 2 rows, although they're not really rows of 4. That's how we learn them. The carpal bone gives flexibility to the wrist as the rows glide across one another. So each of these bones here has cartilage, and it is a synovial. They are synovial joints, so they've got synovium as well. So they can glide in all different directions, and that's why we've got all these different movements available in our wrist, because it's like obviously not like marbles because they're perfectly spherical, but it's like having a bag of marbles in grease. Yeah, so you got some olive oil or something with a bag of marbles, and they're all like ball bearings, all gliding over each other, but they're all shaped in different shapes, so they glide in certain directions. Yeah, so that's how we get the movements that we do out of the wrist. The rows are arranged when we're learning them proximally and distally. Okay, so the nearest and then the furthest. Okay, so let's have a look at that. So this is the palmar view of a right hand. So the best thing to do, again, if this is all new to you, is get your right hand in front of you whilst you're looking at that image there. And then the thumb side is your radius side. So that's this bit down here. So there's your thumb. And then the on the side is the little finger side, which is the fifth just there. So it'll be like that. Okay. And then what you can do is you can try to work out which bone is which in order. Okay. So if we go for the proximal row first, so that's the row that's closest to you, we've got the scaphoid, which is just here. Okay, so that's the first. So if you feel the radial styloid, the little lumpy bit on the end of your radius, and you drop off, as soon as you drop off into the wrist, the first bone you'll contact will be that scaphoid bone. Okay, and then the next one along, which again, remember, this curves backwards, so it curves towards the dorsum of the wrist. So if you've got quite a chunky hand, you've got quite a bit of muscle tissue, then it's going to be difficult to palpate. If you've got quite a bony hand, then it should be a lot easier. But you've got your scaphoid, and then the next one along from the scaphoid is the lunate. Okay, so that's that one there. And it's lunate because it's shaped like lunar, like a moon. Okay, so it's curved. And then because of that curve, we get side-to-side movements from the capitate. It articulates with the scaphoid, it articulates with the radius. So we get loads of different movements out of that lunate bone. And then the next ones, this is where it gets a bit confusing. So we've got this one here, and then this one here. So that this one is on top of this one. So when you're trying to palpate them, you can't really feel the triquetrum, okay, because the pisiform is more superficial, and that it's quite deep into the wrist. This triquetrum. We'll have a look at it in a second. But the important thing with this area here, so all of this proximal row, it forms the entrance hall to the carpal tunnel. All right, so it's not just flat, yeah, it's curved like that, and then and you'll see in a second on one of the videos. So as you look along the carpal, so that as if it's like that, it's curved, yeah. And then the next row, so the distal row, again, have your right hand in front of you. You've got the trapezium, which is this one just here, and this may not travel well across the world. But in the middle of England, I live in a place called Birmingham, and they've got a specific accent, and it's a bit like that. And the best way to remember the trapezium and the trapezoid is the trapezium is under the thumb, and the trapezoid is just inside. Right? But you have to do it in a Brummie accent. And if you don't know what a Brummie accent is, then you can Google it. But that is your first foray into speaking a bit of Brummie. So trapezium is under the thumb, trapezoid is just inside, and that's how to remember the order of both of those. And if we have a look here, there's the end of your thumb, okay, so the metacarpal, and then we've got the next metacarpal along there. So they both kind of join together with the trapezium and the trapezoid thumb and first finger, okay, but not these bits, the bits in your palm. All right, so that these are in your palm. This one, next one, this is a big one. It's called the capitate, okay, because it's shaped like a head. And the easiest way to find this is at the end of the third metacarpal. So you feel all the way down the third metacarpal, and you keep on wiggling the finger so that the ends of the fingers, these bits here, these are your phalanges. So it's not those bits, it's the bits that are in the palm, and your metacarpals in here you'll be able to feel the capitate at the end of the third metacarpal, because it's the only bone that's there. Okay, so if you work all the way down, palpate the joint in between, and then you know the next bone is then going to be the capitate. Okay, so that's that one just there. And then sliding along again, this one's quite a useful one to know. We've got the hamate just here, and that's an irregular shaped bone as well. So the hamate has got a bit of a hook on it, and that's really important because that hook protects some structures that we'll have a look at later. Okay, so if you have a look at the hook of the hamate and the pisiform, they kind of build up the walls of the carpal tunnel because it's curved. Okay, right, let's have a look at some of those. So these are your carpal rows. So I'm going to have a look at this, and then I'll show you the carpal tunnel shape as well. So these are all your carpal bones. So again, this is the same orientation as the image that you've just seen. So you've got right thumb, and then first finger, second finger, third finger, and then little finger. There's the end of your radius because it's bigger towards the wrist, and there's the end of your ulna. You can see the styloid there, and the stylo would be on the end of that one. So we've got the scaphoid bone just here, trapezium just under the thumb, just there. Let's just play this through. So you can see that they're not nicely, neatly in 4 rows. These are your metacarpals, so this is in your palm. And then that's how we kind of separate them into the 2 rows. So trapezium under the thumb, scaphoid is just here. There's your capitate. Here we go. So there's your lunate. So it's curved like the shape of a moon. Triquetrum, and then pisiform on top. So see that valley that those bones create in that first row. So that's your first row just there. So we've got the radiocarpal joint, because these are the carpals and it joins onto the radius. And then when we slot the next row in, so this is the distal row, we've got trapezium, trapezoid, capitate, and then hamate there. And then there's the hook of the hamate just there. And again, you can see how it forms a U shape when you can look at it sort of cross-sectional. There's the attachment for your thumb. And then there's the rest of the metacarpals, and there it is slotting into that first row. So we've got mid-carpal joints in between the carpals just there. And that will allow some intricate movements of the wrist. So we're going to go gross movements into flexion, extension, ulnar and radial deviation like this. Okay, where they all work as a block, but then you'll get some gliding as well, where you'll get some more intricate movements. But you can't specifically control like the capitate. You can't go, right, okay, I'm just going to move my capitate now. It just doesn't work like that. They all move pretty much together. And what you'll notice is if you do these deviation movements, so side to side movements, if I deviate towards my little finger, so that's going towards the ulnar, I can go quite far. But if I try to deviate towards my thumb, which is the radius, I can't go as far. And it's because of the space that is available either side of the wrist. Yeah, so you see there's quite a big gap. But remember, on the last video that we saw, this was filled with that triangular fibrocartilage, yeah, to allow movement to take place in the wrist. But you're just limited into radial deviation. Yeah, you can't deviate that way as much. So let's just have a look at that. That was one of the movements it was doing towards the end. So there's your metacarpals again, slotting into that proximal row. There's your mid-carpal joins. So when the whole thing moves radial and ulnar deviation, you'll see, so that's flexion and extension. So forward and back movements like this. And you'll get some smaller movements in the upper part. Here we go. So we've got loads of movement towards the little finger, but hardly any towards the thumb. And it's because of the shape of these joints here. Okay, so the radial styloid will block movements in a radial direction. So this is why if you do fall on your hand, you're much more likely to injure these bones here on the end, because there's no more range available. Okay, it's right at the end with the hand pretty much straight anyway. So if you're trying to underload, move it into that direction, the bones will just break. Okay. There's a couple of little things that can go wrong with these bones, and we'll talk about those, especially when we get to the blood supply. And if you've never heard of it before, something to look up is called Kienbock's disease, Keinbocks. It's where you have a lack of blood supply to a bone, maybe because of a fall, some kind of injury, and the bone starts to necrose. It's called an avascular, so without blood, necrosis, death. Okay, so you have an avascular necrosis. So again, something to think about if you've got someone coming in with wrist pain and they've had a fall, they haven't had an X-ray. It's worth getting them checked out. Okay, just before we move on, I want to show you this as well. So, going to add a little bit of connective tissue on and show you this valley. There's your pisiform, hook of hamate, trapezium under the thumb, and then your scaphoid. So we've got the tubercle of the scaphoid and the crest of the trapezium. Now the reason why those two specific areas have been highlighted is because those are quite high points on this valley, yeah? And it's at these high points where there is a covering across the valley, and it's called a retinaculum. And that retinaculum is a flat piece of connective tissue that holds your some of your nerves, blood supply, tendons going into the palm of the hand. It keeps them in place. Okay. The only problem is if you have swelling in this space here, you have an injury to it, or some kind of disease, or even with pregnancy, you can get increased edema, so you get more swelling, and it will close up this space, and it will start to pinch on structures. And one of the structures it pinches on is the median nerve, which we've talked about in the shoulder and in the elbow. So now we're getting to the end of that median nerve in the wrist, and you can lose sensation of these fingers and a little bit of that one because of the compression in the tunnel. Okay, and we'll have a look at that as we go through, but I just wanted to introduce you to it now. So there's the tunnel, and usually it has a roof over the top. So this is it with a bit more connective tissue. So that's the floor of the tunnel just there. So you got pisiform, scaphoid, trapezium, and the hook of the hamate, and then there it is there. Okay, so that's the gap where those structures will pass through to get to the palm of the hand. All right, so that's what it looks like just there. So just wanted to give you a bit of a heads up on that one before we move on. So yeah, we've covered all these, so I'll just leave that there for a sec. So if you're doing revision, you can pause it. And there you go, done. Okay, and then the way to remember the bones. Now, this is annoyingly done in a bit of a the wrong kind of order, if you like, because we've just been looking at everything with a on the right palm, yeah, as if you're looking at your right hand. So we know that the scaphoid on those pictures was down here, yeah. So, and I should change this image really. So scaphoid would be down here, then there'll be the lunate, then triquetrum, and then pisiform, yeah, and that will be your proximal row, and then your distal row, trapezium under the thumb, trapezoid just inside, capitate bottom of your third metacarpal, and then hamate just underneath your little finger. So, so if you go from the thumb across to the little finger on both rows, so if you do the first row, proximal row first, then you've got scaphoid, so that's Sarah, lunate, likes, triquetrum, to, pisiform, play. So it's Sarah likes to play. So you have your right hand in front of you, and the you point just underneath your thumb, and or just above the radial styloid. That'll be that first row. Sarah likes to play. So you go from thumb to little finger, and then you move up to just underneath the thumb. So you've got trapezium, trapezoid, capitate, and then hamate. Okay, and that's try to catch her. And the reason why this was memorable for me is because we had a girl called Sarah on my course, and this was the rhyme that we came up with. Okay, yeah, it's it does work better on your left hand. Yeah, yeah, it's just annoying that we've been looking at the right hand all the time. But even with the left hand, you'd have to switch that row down here and that row up, but to make that image work. But there we go. Okay, so yeah, Sarah likes to play. Try to catch her. Okay, there you go. And there are some rude ones out there. I don't know those. Okay. So this is what we were talking about a little earlier about avascular necrosis. So one of the most common fractures you can get in the wrist and the hand is the scaphoid. And 70% of carpal fractures are scaphoid fractures. And the usual way that people will injure it is because of a foosh, so a fall on an outstretched hand. So typically in the winter when it's icy and or slippy, and then you slip over, you put your hand out to break your fall, and then you break your wrist instead. Okay, usually hyperextending with radial load. Okay, so if you're loading towards the radius, remember it's got no room to move, so it's likely to break a bone. All right. The only problem with this is the blood supply to the scaphoid can be interrupted, and it may be missed, and you can get avascular necrosis of the scaphoid. So it's something that usually they'll keep an eye on. But if you have a patient who's struggling and it seems to be getting worse, then I definitely advise them to go back and get checked again, because the necrosis can take some time to kick in, so you might not see it on, especially on X-ray, in the early stages, because the blood supply is still was fairly recent. But then obviously as it's longer and longer without blood, then the bone will start to decay basically. Okay, so something to look out for. Yeah, 10% of hand fractures, most prevalent in 15 to 30-year-olds, and usually get pain or swelling in the anatomical, that should say, snuff box, which is where you used to put snuff. So if you bring your thumb pointing towards the ceiling, you'll see two tendons which are really prominent when you do that, and it creates a little dip. Okay, and it's in that dip, that's where your scaphoid is. Okay, and in the old days they used to put snuff in there, which are, the Premier League footballers seem to be taking a load of that now instead of smoking. But you'd put it in there and then sniff. Okay, and that's where it comes from. So it's the anatomical snuff box, this area here. But the floor of that snuff box is the scaphoid bone. All right, so that's another good way to find it. The other reason why people will usually get injured is punching something. Okay, so if you punch something with a slightly flexed wrist or not a very strong wrist, then that can also injure your scaphoid bone as well. Okay, this is the blood supply. So it's if there is a disruption to this blood supply to the scaphoid, because if it splits in half, the top half will still have blood, but the bottom half won't. So and that's where the problem lies. Okay, because then it loses its blood supply. Okay, so just something to look out for if you have someone who's fallen coming into your clinic. And then this one was the other one. So the avascular necrosis, and that's what it looks like. Yeah, so you've got normal bone appearance here, normal cartilage appearance, and then this dark area here is where the bone is starting to die. Okay, so Kienbock's is a avascular necrosis of the lunate bone. Okay, and that's another quite common one. So yeah, so that again, just something to look out for. That one, perfect. Right, let's have a look at these. Bear with me a second. Okay, just going to have a look at this. So these are carpo-metacarpal joints. So some of the joint names, just have a look at the time. We'll do this and then we'll wrap up. So some of the joint names in the wrist and the hand are really long, and they can be really confusing. But if you break them down, so these are CMC joints. So I'll just move that out of the way, which are carpo-metacarpal joints. So the carpo is the carpals, which is what we've just looked at, and then metacarpal are the next bones above. So it's where those bones join. So where that distal row joins into the bones in the palm. Okay? And it's not so bad when you break it down like that, I don't think. So these are carpo-metacarpal joints. Here we go. So pisiform, hamate, trapezium, trapezoid, and then these are the CMC joints along here, all along there. Okay, so these are the carpals, and then these are the metacarpals all along here. So there's your trapezium. Here we go. So your palm is here. Just do that one again. Yeah, so it's where you the bones of the palm, basically. So all of these are in the palm, and then there's the joins all along there. Look. So it's your carpo-metacarpal joints all along there. First metacarpal, trapezium under the thumb, and then there they are with a bit of connective tissue on. Okay, cool. Just have a quick look at those on the PowerPoint. So that is these bits here. Okay, so it's all along there. So on the metacarpals, which are the palm bones, so these ones here, these have a distal part and a proximal part too. So the proximal part, this bit here, is the bit that joins into the carpals. Yeah, and that's where your CMC joints are. So your carpo-metacarpal joints are just all along here. Okay, yeah, constitutes the palm of the hand, numbered from 1 to 5, lateral to medial. So the first is the most mobile. Each consists of a base, a shaft, and a head. At the distal end of the bone is the head. And they diverge, yeah, so they spread out as they proceed distally. So as you go out, those bones will come out so that your fingers are wider. Okay, perfect. Right, I think that will do us for this week. There's quite a lot going on with the wrist and the hand. So hopefully that's helped a bit. And next week, what we'll do, we'll finish off the other bones. We'll do a bit of a recap of some, and then we'll start to add in the connective tissue layers as well. We've done a couple today as well. I think it was useful having a look at the carpal tunnel, especially so that you can get that in your head, especially if you're using these to help you palpate things. Because if you expect things to be in rows, that's not what it's like. It is a curved structure. So yeah, some you'll be able to feel really easily, and some you won't be able to feel very easily at all. Okay, perfect. I will see you next week. Hold on, will I? No, in England it is Easter Monday, so we're not in next Monday. We are back the week after. Okay, so we've got a bit of a gap for the Easter break. So I will see you in 2 weeks. Okay, see you then.